Have you ever had the thought, I should stop being so cynical? But then immediately you look around at your life, at the world around you, and in that moment, your cynicism feels warranted. However, everyone seems to rail against cynicism as a complete negative. I, however, have a different viewpoint on it. I believe cynicism to be necessary. Now, necessary does not mean permanent. I view it as a necessary step on your pathway to a more meaningful life and ultimately towards wisdom. Now, Don Quixote Doflamingo provides us with the perfect example of someone who began where we all have, young, ignorant, naive, reached cynicism, recognized the power in it, and chose to build his entire empire on top of it rather than move through it. So when we look at a character like Doflamingo, he, for all intents and purposes, won the lottery of life because we all begin somewhere completely random, no choice of our own. So for Doflamingo to be born on the top of the world in the land of the gods means he began life at the pinnacle. And that is no fault of his own. So all he was surrounded by was opulence, everything he could ever dream of, all of his hopes. He had begun his life already having them within reach. And then, from no choice of his own either, he had that life and all of those hopes ripped away from him. His family, the Don Quixote family, his father, Homing, had decided to leave the land of the gods, to go to the lower realm to be amongst the normal humans of the One Piece world. A noble gesture for a celestial dragon, but a decision that Homing himself was completely naive about because he was born, raised, and lived his entire life within the Holy Land. So he is someone that never grew out of his naivety, his ignorance at how the world actually is. But unfortunately for his children, they were still young and they were ripped away from that life and then thrust into this new situation where now Doflamingo looks around and all of his previous access that he had to all of his whims was taken away. But not only was his wealth and his influence and his power all stripped away from him, he then was met by the reality of the cruelty that life can possess. He loses his mother to sickness, and then being met with all of this cruelty and not knowing what to do with it, he naively believes that he can return to that life, that he can put the veils back over his eyes, because that's how we all begin as children. We have, you know, rose tinted glasses at everything. Everything looks like opportunity. And that's all Doflamingo had around him. And he thought that he, even after being bitten by life, thought that he could return to that situation. And unfortunately for Homing, his father, Doflamingo decided that he would offer up his father as penance to regain that life amongst the celestial dragons. However, Doflamingo did not understand that that was a one-way door, one you walk out of, but you can never return. Now, that was a doorway he never decided to walk through. That was his parents' decision. But he then realized that he could not return. So the full weight of cynicism bared upon him. Because now to him, everything had been stolen from him. He couldn't get it back. And the world ultimately didn't and does not care about your dreams, your wants, your desires. So Doflamingo decided to use his intelligence, his power, his skills to take it back out on the world. You show me cruelty, I will return it. So he proceeds to become a pirate, become the pinnacle of the underworld society, the Joker, the one dabbling in all cruel and darkest things of the world: slave trade, war, weapons, manufactured devil fruits, anything you can imagine. And he starts growing his power and his influence on this worldview that it doesn't matter what you want. Power is what is going to make it right. And he so longed to return to what he had had in the beginning of his life that even after amassing so much power, he then decides to build a pseudo kingdom in the land of Dressrosa. He leads to the overthrowing of King Riku, takes over Dressrosa, and dresses it up to look like a land of love and passion, and everyone is doing so well and has such an optimism and vigor for life. And yet under the surface, you can see it's all being manipulated and built upon his cynicism. All it is externalized into the world. And lo and behold, the one thing that actually ends up becoming Doflamingo's downfall is a character who also experienced the complete unfair nature of life and hadn't stopped there. Now, this character is Trafalgar Law. Obviously, we know Luffy is the one who ultimately defeats Doflamingo, but the plan and the alliance was formed from Trafalgar Law. He is someone who had the atrocities of the world thrust upon him and ultimately was going down the same exact path as Doflamingo. But luckily, Rosinante was there to help correct the course for Law, to show him that he could move through his cynicism. And this journey for Doflamingo is just a lens that I then have used to view my own life. It made me pose questions against myself. And I am someone who I would consider to, in the past, have been the poster child for cynicism. For me, my life, I had visions of great things. I had some talent growing up as a baseball player, and naturally, my dreams and hopes for the future were to play professional baseball. I worked hard at it, but just like most people and young people, I was naive. I thought that my talent plus some hard work was enough to get me there. And ultimately, that was the only reason that I was going to college. And then life decided to show me that just because you dream of something doesn't mean that you can have it. My baseball career ended abruptly. I was then in school, not having any idea why I was even there. And I vividly remember that after baseball fell through and I was sitting there contemplating, well, what is my path going to be in life now? I remember just in every direction that I would look, every thought that I had, all of a sudden everything collapsed down into nothing. It felt like I had went from all of these endless possibilities to zero, because whether it was, visions of grandeur of me making it to the MLB, which if you know the percentages, yeah, that's a long shot, even if you are exceptionally talented. But when we're young, that is the way you view world. Your whole experience of life from a young age is through a very, very small aperture. And then when you enter the world, that aperture gets ripped open and it's overwhelming and it just slaps you in the face. And this is where that pathway, I retreated. I decided to stop right there on my path and retreat into my inner fortress. And my inner fortress was cynicism, because now I had seen the world, I had experienced it. So to me, all opportunity now just looked like pitfalls. Every single thing. It seemed pointless. Why pursue something if it's just going to ultimately fail? And I know it is, because everything is unfair. The people who have are exceeded in things or are going for things are either they have unfair advantages or they simply just don't understand how the world works yet. They just need to wait to experience it. And I had remained that way in life for years. and it embittered me, and it just warped my entire sense of reality. And I know a large portion of it now has to do with the fact that we as human beings, we abhor uncertainty. We would rather envision catastrophe than uncertainty. So we always just shortcut to, well, of course it's not going to work out. So when you're a child and you're naive, everywhere you look, you see endless pathways with sunshine, rainbows, pots of gold, and then the world happens to you. And now all of those pathways just look like huge danger signs, like skull and crossbones. Don't go down this path. There's a bear down that one. That one has a sinkhole. Uh, that one, it leads to a cliff. That's all the pathways look like. And for me, I just retreated onto my cynicism, where Doflamingo built an empire on top of it because his ambition and his desire to hurt the world back for what it had done to him was stronger. Mine was the opposite. It had completely killed my ambition. It had My motivation was gone. I had no direction, and no direction was worth it to pursue because ultimately it was just going to land me back where I currently was. Now, I understand that that sounds extremely negative and pessimistic and nihilistic, but like I stated in the beginning of the video, there is a realm, a frontier beyond cynicism. It is a stepping stone on the journey. So there's nothing wrong with you for thinking this way. There was nothing wrong with me at the time for thinking that way. It was actually a step up from naivety. When you're naive, you're ignorant. You don't know how anything works. But cynicism follows it. And again, naivety is endless opportunity. Cynicism is zero opportunity. Both situations are absolute. There is no nuance. There is no complexity. But that is not how life works. Life is complex. Us as human beings are complex. So, what does taking the next step past cynicism actually look like? Well, for me, I had to ask myself some questions, and then it required me to hold multiple positions at the same time. So, first, questions. I had to become cynical about my own cynicism. See, I had to question my own doubt. I had to I had to doubt why I was so certain that everything was a dead end, that nothing would work out. How was I the arbiter of reality? How could I know the future? The hubris, the hubris that I had to actually believe that I knew the outcome of anything that I would do or even try. So, those are great questions to start with, or that's where I started. And then it required me to, like I said, hold multiple positions in my mind at the same time. Now, this is something that is actually quite difficult because, like I said, we abhor uncertainty. Uncertainty feels like a threat, and threats are to be avoided. It's in our biological wiring, it's in our nervous system, our DNA. However, modern day is a lot safer than it was in the past. You know, You don't have to worry about going out and being eaten by a tiger. And even failure in our current world as it is viewed, typically it's not death. We love to catastrophize things. you know, I try something, I fail, that means I'm outcasted, I die. But really, failure is one, it's necessary, but two, it's simply a resetting back to zero. And I know resetting back to zero is painful. But now that you've experienced the world, that's a good thing because it's actually given you a more accurate worldview. But you've collapsed it down to one singular point of everything is pitfalls, everything is danger, everything is not going to work. But what you have to combine it with is a rational view of the world paired with optimism. Now, I'm not saying optimism is just, oh, think more positively, but you need to be able to view the world rationally. Okay, not every opportunity is legitimate. There are pitfalls. People do have unfair advantages. And yet, even in those conditions, you see people that have risen above those circumstances, even if they were set way back in life, and they still move towards a meaningful life and success. So there's so many proof points that it exists out there. So you have to be rational, that you see the pitfalls. You're not going to see them all, of course, because regardless, you can't see the future. But you have to be optimistic in the fact that you can weather it, that you can survive it. Because you can. I have. And what is actually required when you're holding those two thoughts, you become rationally optimistic. Now, if you're able to hold those 2 points in your head at the same time, the next point for me was, how do I now apply it? And that is where courage comes in. Courage was what I needed. Courage was what I had ran away from. I believed I didn't have it anymore for years. But courage is necessary because life can be a brutal thing. But you have to take courageous action. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to go conquer the world in one day, but I had to take the first step and then take another step. And the whole time I was terrified. I can remember it vividly from the day that I decided, because it is a decision, I decided that I could continue down the path and life for me could get better. So fundamentally, you do have to believe that. And it doesn't require you to blind yourself. You need to be able to see the things that are in front of you, the potential obstacles. But looking at the obstacles 10 miles down the road and then deciding that you shouldn't take the first step today is wrong. For me, once I made that decision and I began taking the first steps, everything did truly change. Now, I'm not talking about externally. I did not achieve, accolades, riches, anything along that line. But what I did start to regain with each courageous step was more meaning into my life. And as I traversed these pathways, even if it ended up being a dead end or led to a cliff or a swamp or whatever, each time I took another path, I was able to gain, like, it was like finding a little treasure chest along the way. And that treasure chest then had some sort of nugget that gave me additional judgment, taste. I knew more about myself. I saw my capacity for thinking was higher, or I could work harder, or I noticed that my courage, my confidence began to both escalate the more steps that I took. And through it, my learning evolved. And I won't sit here and say I'm wise, but I know I know I have gotten closer to wisdom. And my life began to change significantly. And through those changes and taking those steps forward, I managed to meet my wife. And that, I mean, it's just, it makes me a bit emotional, but it just led to a change that has been so overwhelmingly positive that it feels it feels unbelievable. But it doesn't but the most exciting thing is that it doesn't require it didn't require me to be anything special. It didn't require me to get rich, or it didn't require me to have all of the answers. It didn't require me not to fail. It simply required me to take a courageous step every day. And then the next thing I knew, I looked up around me and I was somewhere completely different, somewhere that I never would imagine I could be. And I hope that that is reassuring to somebody out there, because I was the poster child. You could not have convinced me that anything was possible for years. But I also don't want this to sound like I have conquered it, that cynicism doesn't show up, that somehow it's like a permanent solution. It's not. Almost anything in life, it's not. You're happy one day, you're not permanently happy. You're more peaceful one day, you're not permanently peaceful. And even for me, being completely vulnerable and transparent is this YouTube channel, Vandy. I created it. I am 31 years old. I am married. I have a full time job. I have an almost 3-year-old son and another on the way. It would be a complete joke for me to say that my cynicism has not popped back up. It's saying, how the heck do you think you're going to be able to build a YouTube channel and actually get to the point of making money from it? What? Like, how? You're competing with people who are doing this all day, people who don't have responsibilities, uh, people who, you know, use clickbait titles and flashy thumbnails and, you know, YouTube algorithm optimization stuff. And, you know, you're sitting over here hand drawing your thumbnails and just talking about deep things and I mean, honestly, just front loading, just being yourself. And, how could you possibly think that that's going to work? And so I want to share that because I'm still battling it today. It's at a very much lower degree. The voice of that cynicism is smaller, but the way I respond to it is right here. You're seeing it. You're seeing this step that I'm taking in real time. Before recording this video, before recording so many of the videos, I have the same thoughts that everybody does. Like, you have no idea if this is going to work out. Why are you putting in so much work? But the one thing that I can choose to do is show up, take the step, try to find the courage. And each step that I've taken, the next step becomes easier. That is without a doubt the truth. So this is the point where we've seen the journey of Doflamingo, how it perfectly encapsulates the journey that we all experience, how he took it to the vast extreme, where I've seen it in my own life, how I've moved through it. This is just an opportunity that I want to open up to all of you out there. What are the questions you can ask yourself? How are you so certain things can't be different? Why are you not cynical about your own cynicism? Can you believe that things could be better? Can you try to build rational optimism? I think you can. I have, and I'm not special. And honestly, for anyone out there that this does resonate with, maybe you're just, maybe you're neck deep in your castle of cynicism. Maybe you've just began taking the steps outside of it. Wherever you might be, I make these videos to provide a space where you can feel permission to be vulnerable. You don't have to give all the details, but no judgment. I know that when it comes to growing and facing cynicism, that typically you do it alone. I had to do it alone. But that's one of the reasons that I make these videos. That's why I'm talking about this topic, is because it is very near and dear to my heart and something I experienced greatly. And I've seen the other side. I've continued to walk down the path, and it has amazing consequences. But sometimes taking those first steps is much easier when there is a space for you to just reflect. So I want to open the comments up to you guys. I am here not to give advice, not to provide instructions, but to just be here as another human being, also experiencing life. And this will be a place where you will not be judged, and I will listen. And I'm sure there are others out there that will also listen and support. So at the end of the day, there is a frontier beyond cynicism. And it just takes the courage of a single step to get closer to it.